Have you ever wondered why, when you give your whole heart to someone who seems distant, they only drift further away? Why the more love you pour out, the less it seems to be received? It feels like a paradox, that the very thing meant to heal drives them into silence. Yet beneath this mystery lies a truth about the human soul, about wounds, fears, and the hidden ways we protect ourselves from what we desire most. The fear of enmeshment in the avoidant personality is not merely a passing discomfort with closeness, it is a deeply ingrained psychic defense that has its roots in early relational experiences. To understand why giving them too much love pushes them away, one must look beneath the surface of their reactions and into the hidden layers of their inner world. When love comes in abundance, when it arrives with overwhelming intensity, it does not register as nourishment for them in the way it might for others. Instead, it is translated through their unconscious as a threat, a signal that they are about to lose themselves within the emotions of another. They do not experience the gesture as pure love, but as a looming danger of suffocation, a force that seeks to blur the fragile boundaries they have worked so hard to preserve. In the avoidant psyche, independence is not simply a lifestyle or a personal choice, but rather a shield built to protect a vulnerable core. Excessive affection confronts this shield and presses against it until the individual feels cornered. It awakens an almost primal fear, as though they are standing on the edge of being swallowed whole. What others perceive as warmth, they interpret as an invasion. This is not because they do not wish to be loved, but because their history has conditioned them to equate closeness with danger. For them, too much love feels like a dissolving of identity, as if their individuality will be consumed by the needs and expectations of the one offering affection. To the one giving love, this reaction often appears paradoxical and painful. They cannot understand why tenderness and devotion are met with withdrawal or silence. Yet for the avoidant, the logic is internal and unspoken. Their nervous system has been trained to resist intimacy as though it were fire. The more someone reaches for them with urgency and abundance, the more their instincts tell them to retreat. It is not an act of cruelty, but of survival. The heart that has known enmeshment in the past, perhaps through a parent who demanded too much emotional loyalty or an early relationship where their boundaries were repeatedly crossed, learns to protect itself at all costs. When love arrives with great force, it reactivates the memory of being overrun, of being engulfed in a bond where they could not breathe freely. This fear of enmeshment creates an inner conflict within the avoidant individual. On one side, they feel the very human desire for connection and the need to be seen. On the other, they feel the overwhelming anxiety of being trapped. Too much love, when it comes without pause or space, touches the wound of this conflict. They find themselves longing for affection, but simultaneously recoiling from it. To the one offering love, it can feel as though nothing they give is ever enough. To the avoidant, however, the problem is not the absence of love, but the manner in which it is given. Too close, too fast, too consuming. In many ways, the avoidant reacts not to the present love being offered, but to the shadow of past experiences that taught them that intimacy was unsafe. Love given in excess does not arrive in the present moment for them. It echoes with the voices of those who demanded their loyalty or consumed their spirit in the past. They withdraw not from the person before them, but from the ghost of old suffocation rising again. This is why the fear of enmeshment is so powerful, why too much love has the paradoxical effect of creating distance instead of closeness. Their psyche protects them through retreat, ensuring that they preserve a sense of self that they fear could vanish if they surrender too fully to another's affection. The wounded inner child lies at the very core of the avoidant individual's difficulty with love, and it is through understanding this hidden figure that one can begin to see why too much affection feels unbearable to them. This inner child carries memories, not always consciously recalled, of early relationships where love was either inconsistent, conditional, or overwhelming. Instead of experiencing love as a safe and steady flow, they encountered it as something unpredictable, perhaps smothering, perhaps absent, but always laced with an undertone of insecurity. What others might perceive as an act of kindness or devotion today, they interpret through the lens of these old wounds. When love is given in abundance, the child within them whispers warnings. This is dangerous. This is too much. This will cost you your freedom. The psychology of the wounded inner child is marked by a delicate tension between craving and resistance. The child once yearned for closeness, longed to be held, wanted to feel accepted without condition. Yet that longing was never fully met in a way that felt safe. Instead, when love did arrive, it often carried demands, expectations, or inconsistencies that taught the child to mistrust it. Perhaps affection was offered one moment and withdrawn the next, or maybe it was given so heavily that it left no room for the child's individuality. Such patterns impress themselves upon the psyche with lasting force. The adult who emerges from such beginnings does not simply forget. They carry an unconscious imprint of this dynamic into every new relationship. When someone showers them with love today, the reaction is not fresh or innocent. It is filtered through the memory of a child who once felt overwhelmed or suffocated by the very thing they desired most. In this way, the wounded child becomes both guardian and prisoner of the adult self. It warns them against closeness, urging them to protect themselves by building walls, by retreating whenever love threatens to flood in. At the same time, it keeps them locked in a cycle of longing and avoidance. The adult may consciously wish for intimacy, may even ache for it, yet their behavior is driven by the defensive strategies of the child within. Too much love feels less like a gift and more like a trap, because it stirs up memories of being overpowered or consumed. The tenderness of another person does not reach them as it is intended. It awakens the fear that love will once again demand more than they can give. This dynamic can create painful misunderstandings in relationships. The one who loves the avoidant often believes that by giving more, by proving their devotion, by offering unconditional affection, they will eventually break through the walls. Yet what they do not see is that every added layer of affection intensifies the inner child's alarm. The avoidant is not rejecting love outright. They are rejecting the memory of love that once felt unsafe. The wound makes no distinction between past and present. It confuses genuine care with the overwhelming forces of the past, so the adult recoils in order to preserve the fragile sense of autonomy that the child once fought so hard to claim. Beneath this defensive pattern lies an unspoken tragedy. The avoidant often longs for the very thing they cannot allow themselves to receive. The child within them still yearns to be embraced, still wishes for a love that does not suffocate, still desires the safety of being fully seen and accepted. Yet when love approaches too strongly, it does not feel like safety, but like repetition, a cycle that will rob them once again of space and freedom. This is why too much love becomes unbearable. It presses against a wound that has never healed, reopening it and forcing the avoidant to withdraw for protection. At the heart of this wound lies the paradox of human connection. The very thing that was once missing becomes the thing they fear most. The inner child, unable to distinguish between past and present, pulls the adult away from love even as the soul longs to move toward it. This inner division explains why the avoidant appears conflicted, sending signals of both longing and distance. What looks like rejection is in truth a deep and ancient defense, a way of ensuring that the vulnerable child within is never again consumed by a love that feels too large, too demanding, too dangerous to bear. Autonomy for the avoidant is not a casual preference or a surface-level trait, but a fundamental survival strategy deeply rooted in the structure of their psyche. To grasp why giving them too much love pushes them away, one must understand that independence is not something they merely enjoy, it is something they rely on in order to feel safe in the world. Where others may see closeness as a natural exchange of care and devotion, the avoidant often interprets it as a threat to the sovereignty of their being. Their history has conditioned them to believe that intimacy comes with hidden costs, that attachment means vulnerability, and that vulnerability inevitably leads to pain. In such a world, autonomy is the only shield they know, the only way they can feel a sense of control over their existence. When someone showers the avoidant with too much affection, it directly challenges this shield. It is not simply an act of love in their eyes, but an invitation to surrender their carefully guarded independence. They feel the weight of expectation pressing against them, as though each act of tenderness carries with it an invisible demand for reciprocity, for merging, for giving up their own ground. This is not a rational calculation, but an instinctive defense mechanism rooted in the lessons of the past. Somewhere in their story, closeness became associated with loss of self, with being overpowered, with having their needs dismissed or overshadowed by the needs of others. Too much love now awakens the memory of that loss, stirring the reflex to retreat before they are swallowed again. The avoidant's devotion to autonomy is not without longing, however. Beneath their defenses lies the same human desire for intimacy that lives in all people. Yet this desire has been distorted by fear. They crave connection, but are convinced that to accept it fully would mean sacrificing the very autonomy that has kept them safe. This is why their relationships often move in paradoxical rhythms. They may draw close in moments of vulnerability, only to withdraw abruptly when the intimacy feels too intense. They are constantly balancing on the line between desire and fear, between the need for closeness and the need for space. Autonomy becomes the axis on which their entire relational world turns, and whenever love threatens to destabilize it, their instinct is to pull back. For those who love an avoidant, this dynamic can feel confusing and painful. They may interpret the avoidant's need for space as rejection, when in truth it is an act of preservation. The avoidant is not pushing love away because they do not value it, but because the intensity of it feels like a demand that will strip them of the independence they depend on. What the loving partner sees as kindness, the avoidant often experiences as pressure, and the more this pressure builds, the more necessary it feels to defend their autonomy at all costs. This is why too much love, rather than softening their defenses, often hardens them. In their devotion to autonomy, avoidants also risk a kind of loneliness they cannot always articulate. They may push away the very people who seek to love them, not because they wish to be alone, but because they do not know how to remain themselves in the presence of another's affection. Their independence is both a refuge and a prison, giving them safety while also keeping them isolated. Yet to them, this isolation often feels preferable to the danger of losing their sense of self within someone else's embrace. Their entire being is oriented toward maintaining that fragile balance where they can breathe freely without fear of being consumed. The paradox of the avoidant's autonomy lies in this. They want love, but they fear it will cost them the self they have fought so hard to protect. When love arrives in excess, when it comes with overwhelming warmth and devotion, it confronts the very foundation of their defense. They recoil not because they despise affection, but because their survival has been built upon the belief that only autonomy can keep them safe. Until that belief is softened, until love can be offered in a way that honors their need for space, the avoidant will continue to retreat, guarding the independence that to them is more than preference. It is life itself. The paradox of longing and distance defines the inner world of the avoidant, shaping their relationships in ways that often confuse both themselves and those who love them. At the core of this paradox lies a painful contradiction. They desire closeness just as deeply as anyone else, yet the moment intimacy is offered in abundance, their defenses rise, compelling them to step back. This tension is not a sign of indifference, but of a divided psyche, one part aching for connection and another part terrified of what that connection might cost. The result is a push and pull dynamic where the avoidant seems to drift between approach and retreat, creating an endless cycle of mixed signals that leaves both sides unsettled. To the avoidant, love can feel like fire. They are drawn to its warmth, compelled by an unconscious longing to feel accepted and cherished. But the moment they draw near, they fear being burned. This fear does not arise from the present relationship alone, but from the unresolved echoes of the past. In early life, the avoidant may have experienced intimacy as inconsistent, conditional, or overwhelming. Love may have been present but delivered in ways that left them anxious or suffocated. The nervous system, shaped by those experiences, learned to equate closeness with loss of freedom or emotional danger. So now, when genuine affection arrives, the avoidant feels both the sweetness of fulfillment and the dread of entrapment. The paradox unfolds because both feelings are equally real, both tug at their heart, and they do not know how to reconcile them. This paradox is often misunderstood by partners who give love freely, believing that more affection will heal the gap. Yet the avoidant reacts not with gratitude but with withdrawal. The flood of love overwhelms their fragile balance, awakening the instinct to retreat. To the one offering love, this feels like rejection, but to the avoidant, it feels like survival. They step back not to punish but to protect themselves from being swallowed whole. The more someone reaches for them, the more necessary it feels to preserve their distance. Yet in that same retreat, they ache silently for the connection they are denying themselves, a private hunger they rarely confess. Living in this paradox produces a profound loneliness for the avoidant. They stand at the threshold of intimacy, yearning for what lies inside but unable to cross without fear. The person they care for deeply becomes both comfort and threat, an anchor of safety and a reminder of the danger of enmeshment. They may fantasize about closeness, imagining the relief of being fully understood, but when closeness manifests in reality, their body and mind rebel, urging them back into solitude. This contradiction leaves them caught between worlds, belonging fully to neither. They cannot release their longing, nor can they embrace it without fear. For the avoidant, too much love intensifies this paradox. When affection is offered in abundance, it heightens the internal conflict to unbearable levels. Their longing is stirred, yet their fear rises even faster, pushing them into retreat. This is why they often seem distant when loved most intensely, and why they may return only once space has been restored. It is not the absence of desire, but the inability to bear the flood of emotions that connection awakens in them. Love feels like a wave, and while they long to stand in its warmth, they fear being pulled under by its force. This paradox of longing and distance is one of the deepest struggles of the avoidant soul. It reveals their humanity in its rawest form, the desire to belong clashing with the fear of losing oneself. In this space, love becomes a double-edged sword, both gift and burden, both promise and threat. They are left to navigate an inner landscape where every step toward intimacy stirs the impulse to retreat, and every retreat leaves behind a hollow longing. The paradox is not a flaw in their nature, but a reflection of old wounds still echoing through the present. It is the endless dance between yearning and fear, closeness and distance, a cycle that repeats until love is offered in a way that soothes rather than overwhelms, allowing them to breathe within connection rather than suffocate in its embrace. Balance is the hidden key to reaching the heart of the avoidant, for it is not the absence of love that they seek, but a love that honors space as much as closeness. Too often those who care for them believe that the way to dissolve their distance is to pour more affection into the relationship, to prove devotion through constant reassurance and presence. Yet for the avoidant, love that comes in overwhelming abundance feels less like care and more like an invasion. What soothes them is not intensity but rhythm, a flow of connection that allows them to move between intimacy and solitude without fear of punishment or abandonment. Balance is the form of love that does not suffocate, the kind that respects their need to breathe freely while still knowing they are cherished. This balance mirrors the natural rhythms of life itself. Just as day alternates with night and the tide ebbs and flows, so too does the avoidant need both closeness and distance to feel safe. When affection is given in measured waves rather than floods, it creates a sense of harmony rather than overwhelm. They can step into connection without fearing that their individuality will be lost, because they know that space will always follow closeness. The problem arises when love arrives as a tidal wave, unrelenting and all-consuming. In such moments, the avoidant retreats, not because they despise love, but because it feels out of rhythm with the natural pace of their psyche. Too much love without pause feels unnatural to them, and their instinct tells them to protect themselves through distance. Balance also requires trust, both from the one giving love and the one receiving it. For the avoidant, trust is not easily given, for their past has often taught them that closeness comes with hidden demands. Yet when love is offered with patience, without urgency, and without the pressure to constantly merge, they begin to feel safer in allowing themselves to lean in. They begin to see that love does not have to consume them, that it can exist alongside their autonomy. When the partner respects this rhythm, the avoidant feels less of a need to protect themselves with withdrawal. Instead, they can participate in connection with less fear, knowing that their boundaries will not be violated. For the one offering love, this balance may at first feel unnatural. Love is often imagined as intensity, as an all-encompassing devotion that leaves no space between two people. Yet to truly reach the avoidant, love must be practiced with restraint, like the art of breathing. Too much inhalation without exhalation suffocates, just as too much closeness without distance overwhelms. The partner who learns to love with this rhythm begins to notice that the avoidant opens more easily, not less, when given space. Paradoxically, it is not the flood of affection that draws them in, but the gentle tide that respects both togetherness and solitude. This balance is not about withholding love, but about shaping it in a way that can be received. The avoidant does not reject love itself, only the form of love that threatens to engulf them. When affection is expressed steadily, calmly, and with respect for their boundaries, it becomes something they can trust. Over time, the fear of being consumed begins to soften, and the avoidant discovers that connection does not require the loss of self. They learn that love can be a partnership of equals, a dance where each step forward is followed by space to breathe, and where intimacy deepens not through pressure but through patience. In this way, balance becomes the bridge between their longing and their fear. It allows them to remain connected without sacrificing their independence, to experience closeness without feeling trapped. Love, when given with balance, does not push them away but draws them in gently, creating a sanctuary where they can finally relax into intimacy without the instinct to flee. It is in this delicate rhythm that the avoidant learns to trust, to receive, and to love in return.